All right, let's talk Dallas Cowboys. I'm Nick, and this is our daily Cowboys show. A lot of news out of Cowboys camp. Some good, some not so good, some that could have been really bad that ended up being not so bad. A lot of stuff to break down today. As always, if you have any comments or questions, leave them in the comment section below. We'll get to them on our next video. And at the end of today's video, we're going to address yesterday's comments or questions, so make sure you stick around for that. But without further ado, let's jump right into the news. For anyone who is not aware, offensive tackle Tyler Gayton left practice yesterday with a serious knee injury. It was reported initially that an ACL tear was the fear. There were some reports that came out prematurely that said it was a torn ACL, but when it was finalized, all said and done, all reports, and this has been confirmed, that the worst did not happen. Good sigh of relief there for the Dallas Cowboys. Let's pull up this report here, courtesy of Nick Harris at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. Great reporter. Should follow him on X if you're looking for a Cowboys reporter to follow. He posted, Cowboys left tackle Tyler Gayton suffered a bone fracture in his right knee, and MRI confirmed just now here in Oxnard, according to a team source. ACL intact. Obviously, that's good news there. But still tough for a player that certainly needed the reps at camp. Timeline is a rough estimate, but looking like 4 to 6 weeks. And of course, the Cowboys season opener against the Philadelphia Eagles in Philly is right around the tail end of that 6-week mark. So the question is he going to be available for week 1? Barring a setback, he most certainly will be available for week 2. Question mark if he'll be ready for the Philadelphia Eagles to kick off the season. Obviously, this is a disappointing news here because Gayton was a guy who was having a good camp, seemed to be taking steps in the right direction after a disappointing rookie season. But I'm going to take a little bit of a positive spin on this. Obviously, it could have been catastrophic for him. Having a severe knee injury, an ACL tear, as it was originally feared, would have cost him the entire season. But one of the things I think a lot of people in the media forget is how much training camp just wears down people's bodies and fatigues and just destroys them, right? You spend all off season, and Gayton, to a man, every single reporter, every single coach said he worked his butt off. He worked on his technique, his fundamentals, his body, his diet, all of that. He put his body in a great position. Training camp, no matter how hard you work during the offseason, destroys it. It's one of my big complaints with how the NFL and college is the same way. When I played college football, this happened every year. You work all summer long to build a certain physique, to get a certain body weight composition, a certain amount of endurance, and then you go through training camp and it destroys it all, and you start the season totally fatigued and worn out, right? You spend all summer getting ready for the season, and then in a few weeks you just get destroyed just because of the level of stress it puts on your body. I think Gayton here, in a little bit of a weird twist, may have avoided that issue. Now, obviously, you want him to be healthy. No one's hoping for an injury, of course. But when I think it's all said and done, if he can come back successfully from this knee injury, and all reports indicate that he will, it's actually being categorized by the team as more of a knee sprain than anything more severe, then I think he will be in good shape. He will have his physique in a good position, right? It's not like it's not like he's going to lose out on everything he worked for. He still has the technique he worked on over the course of the offseason. He still has the first slate of practices where he did a lot of good things. He actually also has an opportunity in this new offense under Schottenheimer to take a step back, get the playbook a little bit more, get a little more mental work here at the left tackle position. Now, again, in a perfect world, you want him to be on the field. You want him to get those reps, and that's still the ideal. But if you think of all situations that could have happened, if there's one guy on this team outside of one of the superstars where it's like, hey, could take training camp off after about a week or two of practices to keep his body in good shape, to keep working on the mental side of things, I think Gayton's one of those guys who would be at the top of the list. So again, this is not the end of the world. This is actually, I think, a lot better than it could have been. And of all the guys to miss extended time during training camp, Gayton is one of the better guys to do that. This actually may have a silver lining for the Dallas Cowboys. Again, not hoping for an injury and certainly hoping Gayton can get healthy quickly. But of all the things that could have happened, this is far from the worst. There's a lot of dooming right now in Cowboys Nation, and then there was some positivity when it was announced he would come back before a lot of people thought he would have. Most people thought he was done for the year. But I still think the fact that he's missing the offseason in terms of training camp and the preseason, not a terrible thing when it's all said and done. And now we shift to who's going to replace him. That seems to be Asim Richards. And a lot of people, when Gayton first went down, were like, Richards, oh my goodness, if he's our left tackle during the season, we are screwed. Season over. But here's where it gets interesting. And normally we start the show with our stat of the day. We wanted to get to this news first, but now we're going to transition to our stat of the day, or our chart of the day, as I like to say. So this is Asim Richards' pass blocking grade according to PFF last year compared against select starters. So we have Cam Robinson, starter for the Houston Texans, good team. You have Orlando Brown Jr., starter for the Bengals, good team. And then you have Rob Havenstein, starter for the Rams at tackle, good team. And you can see Richards' pass blocking grade. Again, smaller sample size, understand limited roles. It's not perfectly apples to apples. But he actually had a better pass blocking grade than all three of those guys. Now, Richards' run blocking grade quite bad. So we're not saying he's a great player. I'm not calling him a Pro Bowler. I'm not saying he's a quality starter even. But the moment Gayton went down and people are like, Dak Prescott's going to get killed, the season's over, everything's completely blown up. When you actually look at the data and look at Asim Richards and what he provides from a pass blocking perspective, he's actually pretty stable. He's a quality backup left tackle as a pass protector. Only one penalty during the playing time he got last year compared to Gayton, who I think had 45 billion penalties when it was all said and done. Again, I'm not saying Richards is a quality starter. I'm not saying you want him to be your starter. But if all the things that could happen, if Richards has to play significant time at left tackle for this Cowboys offense, that's not the worst thing in the world, right? Because again, not my opinion, that's what the data says here, guys. And I think when we can take a step back and put feelings, emotions to the side, and even when Richards played last year for Dallas, he did a lot of good things as well outside of what I'm showing on the screen here statistically. He is not a bad backup left tackle. Again, he's got issues as a run blocker, but overall, him playing significant football, not the worst thing that could happen for this Cowboys offense, not the worst thing for Dak Prescott. Let's take a step back. Anytime one bad thing happens, an injury or whatever, everyone in the Cowboys Nation media just collapses into dooming, right? And I understand the Cowboys have a lot of reasons to be a doom-minded kind of franchise over the past 20, 30 years with the lack of significant postseason success. But not everything is a disaster. Injuries are going to happen. Backups are going to have to play. And Richards, of all the backups you could have at the left tackle position, not the worst, right? I remember, 2017, I think it was, when Chaz Green, if I remember his name correctly, was an offensive tackle from Florida. He had to get playing time. He was so atrociously bad. I think he gave up like 6 or 7 sacks to Adrian Claiborne of Atlanta in one game. I mean, it was a total debacle, total disaster. That's not what Richards is, or at least he wasn't that last year for Dallas. I think, again, of all the positions to have an injury where you have to rely on a guy for a game or two, left tackle with Richards is not the worst one. This is a lot better than people think. The doomers out there, the constant negativity, we need to dial it back a little bit. Look, I'm not saying you have to be all sunshine and roses, but let's not all be doom and gloom, guys. Richards has proven himself to be at least a capable pass protector. And again, that's not just my opinion. That's what the data says as well. All right, moving on to our next story. This is courtesy of Joe Hoyt. And one of the things you'll notice, as you see on the screen there, we like to put it the Twitter and X handle where appropriate for people that broke the story or posted the story. We want to let you guys know these are guys that we trust on this channel to follow, that we say, hey, they do good reporting, boots on the ground guys. They're not, random fly-by-night social media accounts. So again, we're highlighting Hoyt here as the guy who's doing good reporting. So if you're looking for an account to follow on X or Twitter, he is a good one to do just that. Hoyt posted earlier this month, Big Duke 50, talking about Duke Mayweather, offensive line guru and offensive line coach. He worked with Gayton specifically, along with a lot of other people. Told us that the Cowboys have the most talent-rich offensive line depth that he's seen. With multiple recent O-line injuries, we're about to find out. I kind of made this point the other day when I was talking about the Cowboys up front when Robert Jones had his injury, the veteran guard that they signed. A lot of people look at the Cowboys offensive line and you take a step back and just look at the group and the depth there. There's legitimately an argument to be made that from top to bottom, this is a championship offensive line if Tyler Gayton can step up, right? And they could become capable at left tackle. Because if you look at it and you say, okay, we have BB at center, good player. He's an emerging, really nice player. Smith is one of the best guards in football. Booker is a guy who will become a good guard. You had Jones as a veteran guard. Unfortunately, he's hurt. But again, he was a solid backup. Hoffman is there as well. He's a good backup. We saw him play a lot last year. Love his tenacity. Love his physical nature. He's just the perfect backup interior offensive line. Versatile, can play center or guard. Great kind of player. You look at Terrence Steele, of course, at right tackle. I look at a guy like Nathan Thomas as a young offensive lineman, as a guy who was a potential steal last year, got hurt. Schottenheimer's giving him some good praises here. They've got a bunch of other guys in the fold as well. This is a very deep group up front in terms of having guys with experience, guys with good credentials, guys with high potential at all levels of the depth chart. So we have this weird world, and it happens in the NFL. A starter goes down, and you just think, oh, well, that's it. The backup has to suck. Like the game's over, season's over, everything's lost. Well, might as well pack it in. 0-17, right? And that's just negative, right? That's for no reason. The Cowboys have good depth, and this is one of the things you do when you draft for depth and you find good free agent signings, like Dallas did this offseason. Now, look, injuries happen and they suck, whether it's with Jones or Gayton, but the reality is this is why you sign guys. This is why you bring them into the fold. They've had some good young guys. They have some good veterans, guys with some good experience, some guys without any experience. It's a good mix and match. They hired a good offensive line coach, offensive line staff, offensive coordinator Clayton Adams comes from that offensive line tight end mindset, so he's going to have a big addition in terms of his mindset and strategy and orientation for the offensive line group up front. So this is a group as a whole. And remember, an offensive line is a group. It's a starting five, but it's also all the depth guys as well. That is a lot better than people think. People looked at Tyron Smith moving on last season, Zach Martin retiring before this season, and they're saying, listen, transition year, there's going to be a lot of issues up front. But when you look at the talent across the board, it's a pretty darn good group. Now, don't want to have too many injuries. Right? At this point, we don't want to get too crazy with it. But the depth is there. And if they can be ready for the most part for week 1, week 2, and by all accounts they will be, the foundations of this offense, the foundation, in my opinion, of this team will still be in place. And listen, it's, again, like I said, where the chart, the data was speaking for itself. Duke Mayweather, it's not my opinion, it's his opinion that's matching mine. This is a really good group up front. All right, next story here, also from Hoyt, kind of similar vein here. Brian Schottenheimer was interviewed in a press conference. He said, we're going to run the damn ball. You don't have to worry about that. All right, you talk about mentality. You talk about putting your team in positions to be successful. Love this from Coach Schotty here. And again, offensive line-wise, right? You're talking about, well, we're going to have to replace some guys, some injuries. One of the things that can help mitigate that is if you just run the football. Because pass protection and isolation pass ball against quality pass rushers, that's where you can run into trouble. Whereas if you can just run the ball right at people, you can negate a lot of that. The Dallas Cowboys defense in 2023 was a great example of this. They were not a good run defense team in 2023, but they were so good at rushing the passer that when they built any sort of a lead and the other teams had to throw, they got to unleash their pass rush and other offensive lines just couldn't hang with them. So if the Dallas Cowboys, with injuries, let's say to Gayton and let's say Booker goes through some rookie lumps, and Terrence Steele obviously has his foibles as a pass protector, if they're not great at pass protection early on or at different points during the season, just run the football, run right at teams. And we saw that at times the second half of the season. I think we're going to see a lot more of that going forward. And I think this is what Brian Schottenheimer, his whole strategy is. This is what he was brought in to do. Simplify it. Like, let's not overcomplicate this thing. Even if you look back, just a few years ago under Mike McCarthy, when Kellen Moore was the OC, I thought the Cowboys were so good, 2021 and at times of 2022, where they just ran the football with either Zeke or Pollard when Ezekiel Elliott was still doing good things, of course, and they do play action bootlegs off of it and then hit the tight end or hit the receivers on a crossing pattern, and they would just be hyper productive. And every once in a while, they just take a shot down the field with Cooper, Lamb, or Gallup or whoever for a big play. And that was basically what their offense did. And it was so good, so efficient, so unstoppable at times. What happened with Kellen Moore is he got too cute, got too clever, he got too aggressive. And I think Mike McCarthy got too West Coast offense, too trying to be methodical with the passing game. And I think both those play callers, great coaches in their own respect in terms of being far better than I. I'm not an NFL coach, right? Moore and McCarthy have been NFL head coaches, right? Moore going to his first season. McCarthy's had a lot of seasons. Mike McCarthy's won a Super Bowl. Kellen Moore won a Super Bowl as an offensive coordinator. These guys know a lot about football, a lot more than I do. But when I think you look at what they were doing from a strategy perspective, I think they got a little too cute, a little too clever with how they personally envisioned the Cowboys operating. I like to see the fact that Schottenheimer's going back to the keep it simple, stupid method. Hey, listen, man, we're just going to run the football. Love this from the coach here. All right, next story here. This is courtesy of Patrick Walker at Voice of the Star. Again, similar kind of vein. We're seeing a sort of theme here emerge with recent commentary. Phil Maffa, I'm starting to feel him. That was Brian Schottenheimer on the rookie running back after the Cowboys' first padded practice of 2025. Yeah, so Phil Maffa, late round selection out of Clemson, a lot of flaws as a prospect, right? Doesn't have great speed, in terms of catching the football's okay. He's not not in terms of elusiveness and agility, he's not really great there. But downhill, hard physical running, he is outstanding. And I think you talk about wanting to run the football. You talk about making it easier on your offensive line. You're talking thunder and lightning. I mentioned a second ago that 2021 Dallas Cowboys offense, right? With Elliott being the thunder, Pollard being the lightning, hyper efficient, hyper effective, hyper productive. You could start to see the long-term vision of the Cowboys with Jaydon Blue, running back out of Texas, being the lightning, and Phil Maffa being the thunder potentially. And I think as a long-term perspective, that's where the Cowboys are moving towards. Obviously, you have guys like Javonte Williams, of course, probably going to be the RB1, the running back one to start the season. We'll see how things shake out over the course of training camp, of course. And I know a lot of people see Deuce Vaughn making plays. I'm a little, hey, it's Deuce Vaughn making plays in training camp. We've seen this before. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. But again, when you look at what these two guys are doing, Maffa and Jaydon Blue specifically, making plays in training camp, but they're making plays with what they're stylistically oriented to, and that's the important thing. Blue's making home run hits out of the running back position. He's finding creases, cutbacks, showing off his elusiveness, making plays out of the backfield, catching the football. Maffa's being felt, physical presence. Love to see that. I think Thunder and Lightning is emerging in Dallas with these two running backs. Look, Maffa is a fan favorite. There's a lot of guys that were high on him. I think for what he could be as a physical downhill runner, he could be a great addition for Dallas, especially when it comes to short yardage. Because if you look at the structure of the offense right now, outside of maybe Hunter Lipke on like fullback dives, they don't have a power runner to get those key first downs. Even Ezekiel Elliott at the end of his career could still do that at a reasonably efficient level. I think Phil Maffa could fill that role. The question is, are there enough running back spots? That's going to be what it comes down to. Got to see more out of Maffa to see if he's worth an active roster spot. But again, good news that Schottenheimer's feeling him. Again, hyping this guy up. Good coach, inspiring players, all that kind of stuff. Maffa, a guy to keep an eye on. He's one that I want to see more than anybody else in preseason. If he can have his physical downhill running attack translate from Clemson to the Cowboys, I think he could be a key player for this Cowboys offense. All right, chugging right along here with more stories. This next one is courtesy of Kyle Yaumans, just with some notes from the most recent practice. Obviously, the news of Gayton dominated all the headlines, but just getting into actually what happened. And I think there's a lot of good stuff here. Just going through it here for you guys. Turpin was really involved on offense. There's an emphasis to get him in space. Boy, has that been a theme. Schottenheimer and this entire new offensive structure, obviously they want to run the football, but they're getting Kevontae Turpin in the football in a lot of different ways. As a running back, right up the middle, outside runs, screens over the ball. They are giving him the football a lot of different ways. They want him to be a big part of their offense, something to definitely focus on there. The offense in general is building from the ground up. Not a ton of deep shots. He mistyped there. He meant to say ton, not top. Occasional more than anything, but mostly working intermediate to short game. Yeah, I think that's important because anytime you're trying to work on timing, which I think training camp is the most important thing, let's not worry timing about these vertical shots. You can kind of, I think a lot of that is based on positional matchups and certain things with receivers and how you want to throw the football. But that intermediate short, those timing slants, those deep in cuts, those deep out cuts, those corner routes, that's something to really nail down now, especially when you have a guy like, of course, Pickens emerging into the fold. You got Turpin getting more opportunities. I think now's the time to really focus on that stuff. So that's a good job by the Cowboys coaching staff. Worry less about the deep shots. Those are the crowd pleasers. It gets everyone cheering, makes the headlines on Twitter and ESPN. But this is where you don't want to make the headlines. You want to do the smart football move, which the Cowboys are doing there. Good to see that. Trenches were tough today. Lots of physicality and hitting, more than normal. Look, a padded practice, that's going to happen. Welcome to the National Football League. Dak commands this offense, but the edge rushers command the line of scrimmage. Yeah, the edge rushers, whether it's Donovan Ezraku, the rookie, Sam Williams, Micah Parsons isn't even playing, but Dante Fowler, veteran, returning, he's been getting a lot of praise as well. This edge rushing group for Dallas is top 2 or 3 in football. They are elite. They're a championship edge rushing group. I think that's undeniable. I think the question is going to be the rest of the defense, mainly stopping the run. You're looking a lot on the linebackers. What's going to happen at defensive tackle? Mossy Smith reportedly not doing so good so far. I mentioned at the beginning of training camp, they're trying him in some new spots. I think that was a sign of sort of setting up the precursor to cut him and let him go. They're giving him a final opportunity to say, hey, we'll try a 3 technique outside shoulder of the offensive guard as opposed to like a nose or a 1 technique head up or on the outside shoulder of the center. A 1 tech is on the outside shoulder, either shoulder of the center. A 0 head up nose, 0 technique would be head up with the center. I think he wasn't doing good in that 0 or 1 technique role. They say, hey, we'll move you to 3 technique, see how you do. Not doing so hot. Edge rushers, though, doing great. It's always nice to see. Good stuff from the receivers today. This is going to be a fun group. Yeah, listen, nothing against Kyle Yaumans here. I think he's a good reporter, but I love comments like this during training camp, especially when you have CeeDee Lamb and Pickens, right? You've got, one of the best top 2 or top 3 wide receivers in football, and you've got a Pro Bowl star caliber receiver. You've got a, kind of a kick returner, weapon X kind of guy in Turpin, and you've got Tolbert and Mingo duking it out for wide receiver 3. This is a lot of talent here in terms of what you have potentially in this wide receiver group. Of course they're going to look good. Of course it's going to be fun. It's a good group. And you talk about the edge rushers being a championship group. I think the Cowboys pass catchers, tight end included, by the way, with their receivers, that's the other part of this team that is championship class. Those 2 elements, edge rusher and pass catcher, put them at the top of the NFL. Again, the fact that they're doing good is important, and I understand, but this is a really talented group. Those 2 guys in particular, again, edge rushers, pass catchers. Love to see them doing well, but I think, to be honest, we kind of expected it. All right, moving on here. This is from Zach Wolchuk from 105.3 The Fan in Dallas. Stephen Jones insinuated the Cowboys might have more contracts getting done. Tyler Smith's agent, Joe Panos, is out here today per Bobby Belt. Maybe we could get Tyler done sooner than later. Yeah, I mean, there's always these rumors and speculation going on. Obviously, this comes on the heels, like we reported a few days ago, about the tight end Ferguson getting a big extension, a sort of team friendly deal. I think a fair contract, right? Ferguson, coming off a disappointing year, still got the extension. But the year before, 2023, he had great numbers. He only is going to cost the Cowboys seventh in terms of APY, annualized per year, salary cap hit. So you talk about a guy who has a potential to be a top 3, top 5 tight end in productivity, only paying him seventh based on the market today. The market's going to get more expensive. So the deal for Ferguson could look pretty good overall. It's a kind of a good deal for both sides. The fact that they could be potentially working on a Tyler Smith deal, like to see that. There's rumors about Deron Bland as well. Yeah, I think with the Micah Parsons thing and the contract overhang there, I do think it's important to continually work beyond that and find other opportunities. And look, I think what we've seen from Dallas this offseason, we saw it with Oso Odighizuwa, we've seen it with Ferguson. They're not afraid to pay guys. They're not afraid to dole out checks. They just don't want to go over and beyond and go crazy with it. And I think that's what's happening with Parsons and the Jones family in negotiation right now. They're trying to find the middle ground. I think there's going to be a lot more conversations to happen. And look, if the Cowboys can get a Tyler Smith deal done, I'm all for it right now. Parsons is going to get paid. He's going to get his money. If they can lock down more of these good players, especially at the youth in the early part of their careers, I think it'd be a great move by Dallas. But again, this is just an indication. We've seen this a lot this offseason. A lot of good moves by the Cowboys leadership, a lot of good moves by the Cowboys front office. People focus on the Parsons overhang, and I get it. It's really important. But let's be totally honest here. If you look at the offseason as a whole, it's been a really good job by Cowboys leadership. Let's give credit where credit is due there. I know people really don't like to do that with Jones, but I mean, we have to be at least a little bit honest when it comes to stuff like that. All right, next thing here. This is kind of a fun story. Both kind of a positive and a negative here. So this is the 2026 candidates for the Pro Football Hall of Fame class. And you can see on the screen right there, you got Drew Brees, Larry Fitzgerald, Jason Witten, of course, Frank Gore, Julian Edelman, Greg Olsen, LaShawn McCoy, Des Bryant, Marquise Pouncey, Philip Rivers, Stephen Gostkowski, and Geno Atkins. And there's a couple things you'll notice when you look at all these lists, right? So this is the 2026 class, people that finished playing football at the earliest 2021, in some cases well before, of course. And you can notice two things really jump out at you, right? You have the New England Patriots have 2 guys on this list, right? Which kind of makes sense. The Patriots were the dynasty, and maybe the greatest dynasty in American sports history, certainly the greatest dynasty in NFL history from 2001 to 2018, 2019 timeframe, that 2-decade reign. Absolutely stupendous what the Patriots were able to do. But there's only one other team that has 2 guys on this list, if you look at it, and that's the Cowboys. That during that same time period of the Patriots dynasty won, 3 playoff games, top of my head, trying to think of them, right? 9, 18, and 22, excuse me. So again, we're not, and that was before these, that would have been before these guys' time. So we're talking about 2 playoff wins during that time period for the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, look, they obviously had good seasons in 14, 16. I forgot 2014. There you go, throw another playoff win in the mix. But they obviously had good seasons in 14, 16, 7, 9, 2003, won 10 games, right? That was a fun squad. So, I mean, it's not like they were a bad team. They were in the mix a lot. But I think this was one of the things to really focus on when people talk about the Cowboys and why are they getting so much attention? Why do they get so much media buzz? Because they're not very good. They haven't won Super Bowls. It's because they have good players and because they actually do a lot of winning, right? Now, they don't win when it really matters. They've struggled in that department, obviously. I don't have to talk about that. But when you can see the talent they had, Des Bryant's a Hall of Fame caliber guy. Jason Witten certainly is probably first ballot Hall of Fame guy. I think people kind of forget how good these Cowboys teams have been. You go greats, Smith, Martin, Frederick would have been that way as well. Des Bryant, Jason Witten, DeMarcus Ware comes to mind, right? Even Tony Romo, a guy who won't be in the Hall of Fame most likely, is a certainly candidate for an elite caliber player, Pro Bowl caliber squad, one of the faces of football. And I think this is what the Cowboys have had, and it continues into what we've seen recently with Micah Parsons, of course. Dak Prescott, very similar high-level face of football, right? You know, Ezekiel Elliott kind of fell off, but he was a big-name NFL star for a long time. Now you throw in CeeDee Lamb as well, right? Across the board, this is a Cowboys team just stacked with elite-level talent. It really has been that way since probably 2005, if I'm being totally honest. Now, they haven't won, and that's sort of the negative side of the story is that while the Patriots have 2 guys on this list and 6 rings, the Cowboys have 2 guys on this list and 0 rings and 0 real opportunities for a ring. And that's sort of the bummer side of this, right? Is that the Cowboys have won a lot. They've had good players. They just haven't done it when it matters most. And that's sort of the disappointing aspect for Dallas is they've done so many things right. They've done a good job drafting and evaluating talent. They've built good rosters. They've spent the dollars when they needed to, generally speaking, or certainly tried. it just hasn't worked out. And I get it, it comes in spades, right? They won 3 in 4 years. They won 2 in the 70s, right? The 80s, they were good. The late 60s, they were good, and no titles. It happens. I understand these things go in cycles. The Chiefs were essentially nothing from 1970 to 1990. Then they had a few years in the 90s, and they were nothing from basically 2005 to 2018. And now, of course, they're a modern dynasty, the current dynasty in National Football League. So it goes in cycles. I understand that completely. But the reality is it's kind of disappointing when you look at the actual talent the Cowboys have had over the past 20, 25 years to end up with no significant postseason success. This isn't just Cowboys, as a Cowboys fan, I'm not biased. This is what the NFL said. Hey, these are 2 Hall of Fame candidates. There's a bunch of other guys as well, of course, that have been nominated and have gotten into the Hall of Fame that were Cowboys greats. I think this is a situation where as a Cowboys fan, you're kind of torn because you're like, yeah, I've been saying the Cowboys have been a lot better than people think over the past 30 years. But at the same time, no titles, totally disappointing. Just something to think about here as we wrap up the news of the day. All right, let's get into the comments and questions from yesterday's video. A lot of things here I want to highlight. This first one here is from Glenn Art 101. He posted, as a Cowboys fan, we need to be more balanced in our critique of who the Cowboys sign or don't sign. The fans only seem to get excited when the Cowboys let a player go who later becomes a great or better player on some other team. On the other hand, we never hear when that former player flops on the next team. Yeah, that's a really good point. I think I mentioned it before in this video. There's a lot of doomerism that exists in terms of being a Cowboys fan. I think, like I mentioned, you have 3 decades with very limited postseason success, despite having good players. That will happen. But let's be honest, right? Not every single player is worth signing to a big deal. Not every single player is worth paying a lot of money to. A lot of times Cowboys have overpaid for guys, and a lot of times they've let people walk when it's been the smart move to make. So let's give credit where credit is due. Let's not be constant doomerism all the time. There's a lot of reasons that you have to make deals and not make deals in certain situations. The negativity, I think, just bears people down. And look, you can be critical of the Jones family, Stephen and Jerry Jones. They made a lot of moves that I don't agree with. I'll be 100% honest. But at the same time, they made a lot of great moves. They made a lot of good decisions. Now, not enough because they haven't won titles, but to sit here and say it's been all disaster, I think is false. You get a lot of that in the media. You get a lot of that on social media. I think that's misplaced. I agree with Glenn right here. This is from @LivingCountry. He said, barring injury, I think Dak will have a year closer to 23 than 24. The start of 24, the Cowboys had no running game until the last half of the season. Dak needs a running game to be good, and the running game looks to be better. Yeah, absolutely. 100% agree, right? This is what we talk about with Schottenheimer, running the football, right? Phil Maffa, offensive line, Jaydon Blue doing good things, bringing in an offensive coordinator and offensive staff from Arizona that got really good at running the football, making things easier for Prescott. I mentioned the 2021 season earlier in this video with Zeke and Pollard doing great things, made life easier for Dak. That's exactly what Dallas is trying to do this season. Much better compared to 24 numbers. I think efficiency will be close. I think the volume will drop, but I think from an efficiency, much closer to 23 numbers. I think the efficiency will improve with less volume. I think what we saw in 2024 is an aberration like we talked about yesterday. I agree 100% there. At Ewa8755 on a similar vein said, I haven't heard how Dak is moving in camp, but in 2024, even pre-injury, he was not moving well. Look, there are reports he is moving well. He's done a few scrambles and situations. There aren't any concerns there. Prescott in 24, there was a lot of distractions with his contract and CeeDee Lamb holding out. I think that's gone away. I think, again, it just was a different offense. Mike McCarthy, the Texas Coast, West Coast thing, different mindset. The shift to Schottenheimer and his staff has been good for Dak. Again, limited sample size because he's a quarterback. He ain't going to be doing a lot of contact, not a lot of scrambling on camp, and I don't want him to. But so far, it seems to be, I agree with you, better than what we saw last training camp. Talking about, this is from James Oliver 6625, talking about Jaydon Blue. He said, should have known that since he made the full trip with Sark, there wasn't anything wrong with his work ethic. That's referencing, of course, the false report that hit piece that I mentioned, targeting Jaydon Blue's work ethic, called him lazy, turned out to be completely fabricated. If there was, he wouldn't have been around to play last year. The other players at Texas wouldn't have allowed it. This is a really, really good point, because when you talk about players and you say, oh, they're locker room guys, they're cancers or lazy or whatever, if they come from a big championship caliber school, which Texas obviously is, you're not going to make it Nick Saban, Steve Sarkisian, Kirby Smart in Georgia, Dan Lanning, Oregon, right? The list goes on. Freeman in Notre Dame, Day in Ohio State, right? You can just find a bunch of these examples. Dabo Swinney in Clemson, where if you're a locker room issue, you're a cancer, you're lazy, you're not going to play. You're not going to make the team. They'll bury you on the depth chart because Texas is laced with recruiting talent. They didn't need Jaydon Blue to be good last year. They wanted him to play, but if he was a locker room issue or lazy, he would not have played at all. Like, because they would have had another 4-star or 5-star they could have put in his place. This is a great point here. I really love this because we get caught up into the fact that these players, they come to the NFL and then we just sort of forget their entire collegiate careers. These guys have had 3 or 4 years of big-time collegiate experience dealing with coaches at the same caliber in a lot of instances, depending on the school, as NFL staffs. The fact that Coach Sarkisian, a guy who's coached in the NFL, by the way, trusted Jaydon Blue and liked what he did, this is a sign that another piece of evidence here that the Blue piece was totally fabricated, totally a hit job. This is a great comment here, James Oliver. Really nice point. Like to see that. Talking about the Parsons and Jerry Jones trying to get to an agreement. Stephen Jones saying we want to pay Micah, but Micah's got to want to get paid. Delta 704 commented, it's not a good point because Micah and Jerry had a verbal agreement months ago. To the point there were reports of a deal being imminent. That theory of Micah wanting ridiculous money is therefore void because Jerry would have never agreed to a ridiculous number, even verbally. All right, what Delta 704 is responding to is saying, listen, we don't know how far apart. We don't know what Parsons camp is asking for. And I think you bring up an interesting point here, Delta 704. But I think it's also important to understand that anyone who's bought a house or gone through a job interview or interviewed and hired someone is that you can agree on a framework of a deal. You can agree that, hey, in principle, but when you get to the nitty gritty and the actual specifics, you can figure out you're wide on very important things. So let me give you an example of what could be happening here with Dallas. Let's say a few months ago, they had agreed it's going to be a 4-year extension. He's going to get 50% guaranteed, and he's going to get a signing bonus of between $50 and $55 million, right? They could have agreed on all of that and still not dialed in the annual salary numbers or the actual physical guaranteed money, right? They could have agreed on all that, had a framework of a deal. And that's like 3 massive points that I just mentioned they agreed on. But those nitty gritty details really matter. And we see this all the time in negotiations, right? Anyone who's gone through a job interview understands, hey, you agree. You have a meeting with the hiring manager or you're the hiring manager and you meet with an employee, potential employee. You all agree that you want him there. He wants to come work for you. It's a great environment. Everyone's excited. It's a job they want, salary range they want. It's like, okay, let's talk salary. And one guy's like, yeah, I know the salary range is 90 to 110. I'm making up a number here. I want to make 110. And the hiring manager's like, well, I want to pay you 90. Right. And now you got to negotiate. And now you got to figure out time. Now, what are you talking about? Paid time off, right? Benefits, things like that. It's a process. Now, when it comes to smaller deals like a normal salary negotiation or buying a house, that's a quicker process, right? So an interview thing, because of the dollar. So the more money involved, the longer the process will take, right? So a negotiation of a salary may take a meeting or may take a few emails. Negotiating price or factors in a house, that may take a few days. That may take a week or two, right? Because we're talking now hundreds of thousands of dollars. Now, when it comes to a player contract that's tens of millions of dollars, it's going to take even longer. These things take time because the more money involved, the longer it takes. When you go through these processes in life, you're exposed to this. And again, they agreed on a framework of a deal. I guarantee you they didn't iron out the details. Now it's about the details. And my guess is, because none of it's public, is that the Parsons camp is asking for a lot on a key specific detail, much more than the Jones camp is wanting to relent. Eventually, they'll meet in the middle. Deadlines make deals, as the great Andrew Brandt likes to say. And with the regular season not too far away, eventually that hard deadline will lead to a deal between the two parties. I think that's on its way sooner rather than later. All right, this is one of my funny comments. This is from Gridiron Gripes. He posted on our video. Nerds can't go 2 minutes without getting into stats. Holy hell, make it stop. This is kind of funny because, look, I like stats and I like numbers. Look, I played the game collegiately, so, I wasn't good in college, so don't expect any numbers. I was a bench warmer, not good at all in college. So if you're looking for highlight film of me, it ain't there. Trust me. But I played the game. I'm a big fan of the game, but I also like numbers, guys. And this is this weird world we live in where there has to be this 2 poles you have to be on. You either have to be just a guy that watches the footage of the game, or you have to be a numbers analytics nerd, and you can't be both, right? This is about a narrative. This is about telling stories, about watching the game and figuring out what's going on. You have to watch the game, but you can also look at data and numbers. They work together, guys. Let's not be, compartmentalized. Let's not be broken apart at the seams here in terms of NFL fans, in terms of Cowboys fans of, well, you're either numbers nerd or you just watch the game yourself. Let's be both. That's what I am on this channel. Thank you for the comment, Gridiron Gripes. Hope to see you comment on another video very soon. But all right, that's all the comments I have time to get to today. If you have any on this video, obviously put them in the comment section below. Any comments, questions, I'll address them in tomorrow's video. But until next time, I'm Nick, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection.